All right, there we go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to act as both an introductory video and also a preview of the up-and-coming PGL Krakow Major. And I guess, this is like my first time doing this stuff, so it's probably going to be a complete mess. But you know, I'm gonna give it my best shot and try to improve with time. Yeah, hopefully this isn't a complete disaster. But let's jump right into the PGL Major and my expectations and my predictions. This is going to be a preview of some of the uncertainties, perhaps, not the certainties, so to speak. So, for example, I'm not really going to be discussing Astralis, FaZe Clan, SK, G2, because I have those as locks going into the playoffs. They're actually, in terms of what you can predict and what you can foresee, I'd bet all my money on that those four teams are going to make it out of the group stage and thus get a legend spot. So I feel like it's wasting most people's time to delve in deeper into what they might accomplish in the group stage. The playoffs is a whole different matter, of course, but we'll get to that in another video probably. So I thought I'd discuss my predictions for the four other legend spots. Basically, what other four teams apart from Astralis, SK, and FaZe, and G2 will get a legend spot, and of course a spot in the major after PGL's Krakow. Now, of course, what we have to take into consideration is that all you need to qualify and get a legend spot is 3 best-of-1 wins, right? And just, right? But, at the end of the day, to get that legend spot, you're not going to be playing a best-of-3 series, which kind of changes the playing field for a whole bunch of these teams, in my opinion. We've seen North struggling quite a bit, even though, I'd put my money on them winning a whole bunch of best-of-3 series versus teams they've played in the Swiss system. They've still come up short many times. We just saw it at ESL 1 Cologne, right? So that's something you have to take into consideration when you predict, who you think's going to make it and get that legend spot. Sorry, I'm kind of getting over a cold. Now, of course, this might come off as somewhat biased because I have I'm quite fond of Fnatic, but they've been quite how should I say this, unlucky in a few group stages, and that's no excuse, of course. Either you qualify for the playoffs or you don't. They've had some group stage exits, but at the same time they've had some really difficult group stages at that. Just taking, for example, the ESL Pro League group stage, where they basically tied 4-way in the 3-2 bracket, so to speak, and just because, some unfortunate tiebreaker scenario occurred, they couldn't make it to the playoffs there. They fell short at ESL 1 Cologne, of course. They had some quite upsetting, losses there to, for example, Mousesports. They should have probably made it out. Of course, it was unfortunate for them to draw SK in the final round, but, that's the Swiss system. Facts are that they'd probably not, what's the word I'm looking for? Qualify for the playoffs, even if it were a best-of-3 series versus SK. That's just going to be way more difficult because Fnatic's map pool is kind of in tatters at the moment. It kind of feels like they play off of the heat of their players as opposed to an actual concrete map pool. Yes, they're kind of working in some more tactics in there, a slower pace. We saw it at ESL 1 Cologne on the Overpass, for example. They definitely, when they played FaZe, it seemed like they wanted to play a way more patient T-side, which is, it bodes well for the future, I guess, but of course it's going to take time for these players, considering what kind of system they've been playing under for so long now to get used to that somewhat more, perhaps not tactical, but way more patient, setting up the plays as opposed to just, popping heads all across the map. And, I have no doubt that in the long run, it's probably going to work out for them. But as of right now, they're kind of a wild card. I mean, I'm looking at Fnatic and the rest of the roster here, roster teams in the major, and you know what? I sure as hell think that, a Mouse Sports or an Immortals, maybe even a Cloud9 could beat them in a best of one. I mean, most teams, I'd say probably over 50% have a shot of doing that. And thus Fnatic making it out of groups in a Swiss system where they're only playing best of ones, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of a toss-up. What Fnatic's going to show up, and you always say that, right? But to be honest, I'd never put money, despite Crimson Olafmeister being two of the players that have always made the playoffs of the majors. They've always received that legend status. This time, it seems kind of bleak. Yes, we've got some kind of questionable teams in here. I mean, I don't think Vega Squadron is going to accomplish much, and to be honest, I don't think Flipside are going to get that legend status, but Flipside could, overnight maybe come up with some anti-strats to Fnatic. I mean, we know that Blade is capable of that, and, completely blow them out. We saw that Flipside schooled, Hellraisers on Overpass, which is quite a feat. So, it's looking grim for Fnatic, and to be honest, in my pick'em, I have them getting that legend status, but in all honesty, I'm quite uncertain. They're definitely contenders, but it's looking kind of bleak, in my opinion, because most of these teams can beat them in a best of one. And yeah, they could probably beat a lot of these teams in best of one as well, but I wouldn't say, yes, they have some favored matchups, but I'd say, I mean, most of this field is either match up well against them or match up equally against them. So they're going to have a rough time, I think, going into this major, unless they hit some kind of peak I haven't seen in a while from them. So yes, I do have them in my pick'em, but it's still quite uncertain. And the same goes for North. North have had some issues with the Swiss system, and I think that in this group stage, depending on the draw you get, maybe an upset occurs early, and they get defeated, and some other top team gets defeated in the first round, and they draw them in the second round. All of a sudden, you're 0-2, right? That's to say, if you don't beat that, top tier, the four holy grails of the tournament, in my opinion, if you draw a FaZe, an Astralis, or G2, or an SK, all of a sudden you're sitting there at 0-2, and the question is, can you claw your way back? I don't know. If you're North, they've shown that they're lacking in their composure the deeper they get into these playoffs, and I think that's kind of a big flaw, and it's going to prevent them from earning another legend status, in my opinion. I do, however, still have them making out of my pick'em, just because at the end of the day, I feel like I have to evaluate the strength of the team and what I've seen, and to be honest, I'm going to pick North over the likes of Big, Penta, Vega, Flipside, or even Immortals any day of the week. We'll have to see what happens now with Immortals, now that they've actually made it to a major. They've always had quite an unfortunate time at the major qualifiers, but now that they're actually at the major, who knows? Maybe they come in guns blazing. Although, to be honest, they've shown some promise. They've had good results, and honestly, KNG seems kind of lethal at times. Along, when they pull out that double op with Henny, depending on if Henny can prove that he has some form of consistent form, which honestly is unlikely, and history shows that it is mostly unlikely. So we'll see what happens there. But honestly, I don't have Immortals making taking one of those legend spots, unfortunately. I mean, they have promise, or they've shown promise. That's about all I can say. I don't think they're going to beat out the likes of G2, the four Grails of the tournament, or even a Navi, or even a North, or even a Fnatic. I think that, any of those teams see Immortals as a favorable matchup in the group stage, and thus I see Immortals having quite a troublesome group stage unless they get some really crazy draws and an easy road to that legend spot. But instead of rambling on about who I think might not make it, I'll go on and rant about the teams that are uncertain, but I think will make it anyways. So I already told you, that I have Astralis, SK, FaZe, and G2 making legend status pretty easy. But I also think that Navi are going to take it, and it's basically just because, it's a group of mostly veteran players with incredible skill on the roster, and I feel like if I'd had to bet money or my credibility, I'd have to pick Navi over the likes of Big or Vega Squadron or Penta. I'm not a madman. I will actually predict, somewhat sane results, and sane outcomes. So I think that Navi, they might not 3-0 like they did at the E-League Major, but I definitely think they're gonna creep out of this group stage and make that legend status once again. I already told you about Fnatic. I do think that it might be troublesome for them to get out of this group stage, but still, I just feel like they're way more proven than any of these underdog teams, and sure, upsets might occur that, prevent them from eventually qualifying, because they might in the fifth round, the final round, draw someone like Astralis or SK that we know tend to have these slow starts. So that might occur, but just going into it, this is what's so difficult about predicting the Swiss system, is that you can't know before the draws occur, right? A team might get the most difficult draws, and that's that, But, my wits tell me that Fnatic are going to take a legend spot, and, well, I'm inclined to agree with my wits on this one. Same with North. North and Fnatic are kind of in the same boat, in my opinion. Sure, North has a different playing style. They have a proven in-game leader in MSL, but it still feels like, their big hitters are missing most of the time. Config and Magisk as well, might have single games where they're going off. Obviously Config is a bit more consistent than that. He has been carrying for some time now and for the past couple events. But we saw Config, he was kind of lackluster at ESL 1 Cologne. He was having some, immense trouble. I can't remember who they played now in that final round. Oh, I should know this. All I know is that it was on Inferno, and Config was having some immense trouble with that op. He was just getting battered, and Config, being the kind of heated, temperamental player that he is, they're gonna need good starts for them, for the team to kind of tune in and really show up. So that's another factor. The temperament of North. They're young guys. We all know how Magisk gets riled up. Same with Config. Young guys that don't really have that veteran essence where they can just put aside the emotions and just grind out the games and come back, like the Cajun Bees and the Rubinos of old. We already know that AZ's had trouble. Sure, he's kind of that veteran player, but we'll have to see how he plays into it. But I do have them making it out of groups. So that is basically the 7 so far. Now my final team, which might come as quite a surprise, but they've been on the up and up, and it really depends on how they. Obviously it's going to depend on what form they show up in. But I definitely do feel like Cloud9, which is my final pick, by the way, have proven that they still have the capability to make it out of these group stages and grind out the games and really, they have what it takes to at least make it to the playoffs. I mean, will they go further than a quarterfinal? Probably not, right, in this tournament. I don't think so. But I definitely do think that they will make it out of groups, mostly because they're playing best of ones and their play style caters really well if they can get into a map that they're comfortable on. They play that pick-based, kind of aggressive, but they've also shown some patience, especially at ESL 1 Cologne. They've shown that they can also play that patient style and not be too aggressive with the force buys and such things. They've shown that they can really set up plays and prepare properly for rounds, while also, playing that aggressive and pick heavy if they should need it, as a kind of last resort in rounds, which is really promising. I mean, that kind of depth, is required if you're going to make it out of these group stages. And I think, I'm not expecting Shroud and Skadoodle to have the same caliber of tournament as they just did at ESL 1 Cologne. That might be too much to ask for. But if they can at least put up decent numbers, maybe have some clutch rounds, and Stewie and Automatic can come in and kind of, somewhat carry the team. I mean, I'm not expecting Stewie to do wonders, but his aggressive plays can open up the map and then help his teams, help the likes of Shroud. And, I mean, we've seen it time and time again where Stewie kind of comes in and he opens up, he gets a pick, and then Automatic just comes in and cleans up, And that's all he needs to do, is basically instill that confidence and that opening into his team so that they can go and take the round and then grind out these games. And I think that their playstyle actually caters kind of well to when all you have to do is win 3 best of ones, And I think with this roster, I do think that Cloud9 can beat most of these teams. They've proven, especially at EPL when they took those 2 best of ones against Fnatic and Astralis to instantly make it to the playoffs. So I think that Cloud9 definitely have what it takes to make it out of groups for sure. So that's my 8th pick, and that's my basically 8 picks to make legend status. That's about it, right? Now I will say there's an off chance for the likes of Mousesports and like Gambit, but the reason I'm not going with Gambit is basically because they haven't really, proven anything in a while. They haven't really played a top caliber tournament for quite a while. And that might not be their fault, the problems with invites perhaps. I mean, they tend to get invited mostly to tier 2 events still and such. And of course, no fault of theirs, but that means that they're not going to have that same experience with the top tier teams. And I mean, that might go 2 ways. People might not be prepared for what Gambit are going to bring. I mean, they do have Zeus, a very capable in-game leader, and they have immense veteran talent. But sure, I can't remember what tournament it was now, but Dozier had that one tournament where he just went off and had a top tier performance. But that's not going to happen every time, right? You're going to have to look to your Adrens, your Hobbits, and sure, they might make legend again, but I'm not going to put my money on it. I'm going to put my money on teams that have actually consistently played against top tier caliber teams and proven that they can do something in that field. Cloud9 have done it now. They've had some good placings. They've had some bad placings, but at least they have that experience now coming into the major against some of these top tier teams. It's the same with Fnatic. Sure, they've had some group stage exits. I mean, they did get top 2 at DreamHack Summer, losing out to SK, now the best team in the world, but still, they're getting that experience, maybe not on stage as much any longer, but Fnatic are obviously a veteran team, that's not really going to bother them too much, the stage that is. They've always been known as the villains who kind of don't really care about public opinion and the chanting of the crowd, etc., etc. So that's basically my thought process. I think that these proven teams, proven veteran teams, apart from maybe Cloud9, sure, they have some veterans, but they're also, not as experienced as a Navi or a Fnatic, on big stages and big caliber tournaments like this. But I do believe that they've shown enough to prove that they might be able to make it out of groups at this major and get that legend status. Now, closing remarks. I do not have Virtus.pro making it out of groups. I just don't. They're in a devastating slump at the moment. And honestly, when we're talking about predicting and my expectations as a sane person, I kind of have to deny the whispers in my head that tell me, well, at every other major, they've always been the team, famously, they've always been the teams that gave the eventual champions a run for their money, right? I mean, both SK majors, right? Where SK, first as Luminosity Gaming at MLG, they were the only team to take a map off them there. Same when they became SK Gaming and they played at Cologne in the semifinals, 2016. They were the only team to take a map off them there. And then, of course, the latest major, the E-League major, obviously they made the final against Astralis and were up 13-6 and almost won the entire thing. So yes, they've proven that they are capable at majors, but honestly, given their run now with this many group stage exits, even in Katowice, in Poland, in front of their home crowd, they couldn't make it to that stage. Same with ESL One Cologne, the mecca of Counter-Strike, and they can't make that stage. So honestly, I don't think that this being in Krakow and in Poland is going to have any bearing on them, performing immensely, better than they have this, these past couple of months. I mean, Posh even said that, if we make it out of this, it's going to be a miracle. So, I have no faith in Virtus.pro. If they do make it to the playoffs, good for them. But I'm not going to predict that they are. I'm just not going to put, money on it. They've just proven that they're going to disappoint you pretty much if you expect them to do anything great. And in these past few months, so I do not have them making out of groups. I have Astralis, Fnatic, SK, Navi, North, FaZe Clan, G2, and Cloud9.